Is gay contagious? What do you think, Preston?
What's gay? Contagious?
Boys who like boys or girls who like girls?
No, it's not contagious.
Okay, good. I'm glad you knew that. All right.
Why would it be?
Some people thought it was. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Is gay contagious? We're going to answer that question with Dr. Taylor Petrey and whether church leaders thought that sexual orientation could be changed. So you won't want to miss this conversation because we are going to be giving away this book right here. And so I've got my assistant, Preston. Can you come here on camera, Preston?
Hi there.
All right, there's Preston. So show us the drawing here that we've got. Okay, so go ahead, come on closer, and mix that up really good. Okay, this is going to be our winner for the contest. Go ahead and pick one out. And let's see here, what does this say? No, there's only one here. Ann Holmes of Sandy, Utah. So Ann, congratulations, you are the winner of this book right here. So congratulations, Ann. I might even try to stop by your house. We'll see if we can get a picture of it, if that's okay. So, congratulations. Anyway, I just want to tell you, everybody, this is a fantastic book. And even though you didn't win, you should buy a copy of this book because it's fantastic. So, anyway, we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Taylor Petrey. Check it out. So, a couple other issues that I thought were really interesting from your book was this whole idea of sexual fluidity. And so I'm going to ask the question this way. Is gay contagious? And or better, maybe I should say it this way. Do church leaders think gay is contagious?
Great question. And the answer is that up until very recently, yes. And that they thought that heterosexuality was contagious too, right? And so the whole idea behind the notion of a gay cure, which is what people like Packer and others were promising, and we invested a ton of resources, both intellectual and material resources, into the idea of a cure that would be helped by things like reparative therapy and so on. And the idea was, well, if we can get these men, if we can teach these men, well, and most of the concern is around men, which I want to acknowledge. Lesbians do sort of fall in the background a little bit. When they're talking about feminism, they're talking about lesbians, but when they're talking about homosexuality, they're talking about men. And they say, listen, we can teach these guys to play some sports, give them some confidence in basketball, right? If we can teach these guys to work on a car or take up these manly activities and be around other manly men, who know how to do this stuff, then they're going to be just fine. Then their desires are going to become heterosexual, right? In the same way that the worry of the working woman was going to start to desire sexually other women. The concern was that the reason why men were gay is that they hadn't appropriated masculinity enough, right? And so that's why these issues of gender and sexuality are so closely connected for church leaders, because they see heterosexuality as the proper outcome of masculinity or the proper outcome of femininity. And when masculinity and femininity themselves are being weakened in some ways, right? When suddenly women can now work, or be doctors and lawyers, and maybe men might be staying home, or maybe men are sharing leadership with their wives in the home, then masculinity is going to be weakened to such an extent that if it doesn't cause homosexuality for the equal father himself, who's equal with his wife, it's going to cause it in his children. And so his children are going, his male children are going to desire in abnormal ways, right? So this notion of sexual fluidity is really kind of the basis of the way that church leaders are thinking about heterosexuality and homosexuality as sort of, if you can become one, you can also become the other. And why they're worried about the normalization of homosexuality then during this period is because it's contagious. And they say numerous times, including Dallin Oaks in that document that we were just talking about in 1984, that if homosexuality is socially normal, then within one generation, everyone will become gay, and then the population will die out, right? And
didn't they make the same argument about interracial marriage?
Well, not necessarily the population would die out, but they made the same argument that, look, homosexual sex must be so good that it's going to be like so attractive to people that everyone's going to want to do it, right? If we don't have some sort of negative stigmas against it, then everyone would be gay. And that leads to this idea then that they don't believe that people are naturally heterosexual, right? They don't believe there's some sort of hard wiring. They think that the only way that you become heterosexual is through this sort of molding and shaping of the human being into the properly formed masculine or properly formed feminine person. And so it requires a lot of work on behalf of society, on behalf of the church, on behalf of families to kind of produce heterosexuality.
Well, and I will just mention my interview with Russell Stevenson. We talked more about 19th century race, but there was especially a 19th century. It was scientifically known that mulattoes or sometimes they would call them half-breeds. Obviously, you wouldn't use that term today. Would become sterile, and so that would be the end of civilization if we all just married. If white people married black people, it was the end of civilization. So I'm hearing echoes, a lot of this end of the civilization if we allow gay marriage, if we allow interracial marriage, and so it's funny to me, this end of civilization. I mean, it's very what's the word? It's a fear-based argument that if we do this, we're going to have moral decline. Civilization's going to end of the Roman Empire. Even with polygamy, they kind of use some of those same terms. Rome ended because they weren't polygamous; they were monogamous. And so it's funny to me how these arguments get repeated over and over, and they're just silly arguments, aren't they?
There's a sort of moral panic discourse about any change. The reason why our civilization is so great is because we've embraced these values, right? And so progressive values that call into question those established ones are then obviously going to be undoing all of the greatness that we've done, right? And so you see this exact same tension in the sort of progressive and conservative debates about society, about morals, about policing right now, right? We're seeing this conversation, certainly about sexuality. It's always been there. So you're absolutely right. And I hope that one of the things that this book does is give a little bit of like context to where those arguments come from and how they were, because they're citing sources, and they have arguments. And I try to sort of explain where those arguments are coming from and why they were so popular among church leaders during the time.
Yeah. Well, interesting. All right. Well, the last topic I just wanted to cover with you real quick was on kind of the church's dual kind of embracing gays, Mormon and Gay's website, but yet opposing it at the same time. And so can you talk about how the church kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say schizophrenic, but it was kind of weird how they were kind of two tracks going at the same time.
Yeah, so just like we see this sort of split in the egalitarian and patriarchal marriage ideas, right? We also are seeing a split in the church leadership over the nature of sexuality. How quote unquote contagious is it? For instance, right? There's a number of church leaders, I think, are starting to, in the early 2000s, starting to kind of back away from reparative therapy, maybe trying to take a little bit more open and accommodating and even affirming stances. So it's in 2007 that BYU changes its policy that says that it's okay to identify as gay at BYU. Before, you weren't allowed to do that. The way that the policy was often interpreted was if you identified as gay, you were violating church doctrine on that topic, on that subject, and that was because of things that Elder Oaks himself specifically had said, that you weren't allowed to do that and be a member basically in good standing. It was against doctrine to say that. And so, but then we start to see this softening really again in response to the backlash from Prop 8. So 2008 comes along and we see the church sort of say, we've got a real problem here that many of our church members have very negative attitudes towards gay and lesbian members of the church, and you know, a number of activists worked very hard, I think, to get the church to sort of see this as a problem that it needed to address. And so we get in the early 2010s, Mormons and gays, and then later Mormon and gay, I think, came out in 2016, where the church is really trying to address this issue and take a little bit of a softer stance, where the church is going to allow for members to identify as gay and lesbian, and not be under sort of social sanction or ecclesiastical sanction for that. And they encourage the broader membership of the church to be loving and accepting towards those who do identify, which is quite different from what they were doing even a decade before that, which is discouraging people from identifying, telling families that they shouldn't accept their gay and lesbian children in their homes if they had a partner, and so on. So we really see the church kind of like backing away from some of the harsher things that it was saying and attempting to accommodate same-sex or gay and lesbian members of the church up until the point of having a relationship, right? So that becomes the sort of bright line there that the church won't tolerate that, so it opens itself up to saying that certain identities are acceptable within the church, while certain practices are still forbidden. So it takes a sort of identity versus practice distinction there.
Yeah, well, great. Well, everybody, Tabernacles of Clay, you should definitely get it. It was a fantastic book. Really appreciate you spending some time here. Is there anything that we've missed, or anything that you'd like to share with us before I let you go?
Oh, good question. I've been talking so much here. Let me think if there was anything else. I think that's probably some of the main things. So yeah. All right.
Well, it's a fantastic book. Go ahead.
There was. I wanted to thank you for all of the work that you do. This is such a great podcast, such a great show, and thanks so much for having me.
Oh, well, no problem. So, all right. Well, you know what? I think I might be giving away a copy of this. I wish I could get you to autograph it. That would be really cool. But so if we have these conferences next year, maybe you'll get one of these. It'll be a gift from me as well. So Dr. Taylor Petrey, thank you so much for participating here on Gospel Tangents. Really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Taylor Petrey. Taylor, I'd like to thank you for sitting down with me and talking about your wonderful book, and I'd like to congratulate Ann Holmes once again for winning this book right here. So congratulations, Ann. And if you don't have this book, go out and buy it. You can buy it on Amazon. I've got this link right here that will support not only Taylor Petrey, but Gospel Tangents as well. So if you click on this link, you can get a copy of Taylor's book, and you can support Gospel Tangents while you're at it. So thanks again, Taylor. I really appreciate it. In our next conversation, I'm excited to introduce Denver Snuffer. He has an important announcement to make, and he's the leader of the Remnant movement.
But you caught me at a fortuitous moment, because I now have the culmination of years of work by hundreds of volunteers, and maybe the best way to put a context to me is for me to talk about this.
Okay.
These are prototypes. It'll go into production, but we now have a print copy of a new set of scriptures.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please subscribe to patreon.com/gospeltangents. And for just $5 a month, you can hear the entire interview without any interruption. If you'd like a paperback version of our transcripts, go to Amazon.com and do a search for Gospel Tangents interview. Also, if you'd like to give the money to me and not Amazon, please subscribe on my website, and I'll be able to send you a transcript as soon as they are completed, and click the subscribe button. You can also find our latest information on Facebook.com/GospelTangents, as well as we're on Twitter @GospelTangents. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. The link is at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents, and you can subscribe there. Also, please give us a 5-star review. If you want to support all of the podcasts as part of the Dialogue Podcast Network,
go to lyceum.fm, that's lyceum.fm, and do a search for Dialogue Podcast Network or Gospel Tangents, because, that's a pretty cool one too. Thanks again for listening. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some of our great videos. Thanks again.